Welcome to Season 2 of Legal Luminaries, the Paralegal Edition. We are so excited for today's interview. AFP's podcast, Legal Luminaries, shines a spotlight on the insights, trends, voices shaping the future of paralegal education and the legal profession. Legal Luminaries is designed to connect you with thought leaders, innovators, trailblazers, and everyone in the legal field. With me today is my co host and fellow educator, Kelli Radnathy. And our guest today is a legal technologist in eDiscovery, Monica Harris. Welcome to the show. Would you please share a little bit about your background, Monica?
Absolutely. First, I'd like to start with a thank you. Thank you for having me on the show. It's absolutely an honor. Um, I am an IT professional by trade, that is from Philadelphia. I started by working with the IT team in a startup law firm that is now Cornerstone Discovery. So I had a really great start. I was a legal technology manager for Cornerstone. And this was before the recession of 2008. So it gave me a lot of great experience. I got to work on federal cases. I believe I was working on federal cases when Chris Christie was the U.S. Attorney for New Jersey. Absolutely. Great experience to have at a very early start. And then the 2008 recession happened. And with that, I did a little bit of moving around. I found that my skill set easily lent itself to working with nonprofits. And so I worked with a WIRED grant, which is a Workforce Innovation Regional Economic Development grant, which was how to spend $5 million in 3 years to really elevate life sciences in the tri-state area. It was amazing work. And from there, I went to join an engineering team. And it just so happened that that engineering team worked for a company that worked with both healthcare facilities, legal facilities, and they were called Alpha Systems. Alpha Systems was then acquired by eDiscovery, and several years after that became KL Discovery. So that's where I spent a majority of my time in eDiscovery operations, seeing some of the largest cases that we had seen in eDiscovery, working with tools like Relativity and Nuix, and just a really great time when the industry was growing and learning. And then from there, I wanted to spread my wings. I had a plethora of knowledge, of information, and I wanted to see what I could really do with it. So I came to Washington, D.C., which is where I sit now, and I went into product management. Going back to my IT roots, I had worked with enough technology and I understood the user base and their pain points, and I wanted to have a hand in shaping the technology that was being used to solve the problems of e-discovery and litigation technology professionals. So that's what I've been doing a lot of since I've been in Washington, D.C., and I've also added leadership to that as well. Working with a lot of organizations like Women in eDiscovery, ACEDS, the Masters Conference, Blacks United in Legal and Technology, BUILT, and having that all come together so that I was able to create a platform for emerging technologies and advocating for them, and a platform for underrepresented communities as well and advocating for them. So the two together is the platform that I stand on today as I speak with you.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that extensive background and your expertise. I, like you, am a very early adopter in technology and was in the throes and iterations of eDiscovery when it first started, because I am also a federal court practitioner. So I'm with you right there, Monica. And I just wanted to explore today with you because, as you know, this podcast focuses on our paralegal educators, and we
Mm-hmm.
like to share effective teaching tools, resources, and just
Mm-hmm.
general knowledge in legal technology that can aid paralegal educators for preparing our future legal workforce, or in other words, workforce development readiness, right? And I kind of wanted to talk in the vein of integrating legal technology into the space of paralegal education. And
Mm-hmm.
so, just based off of your experience, what are the most critical legal technology skills that paralegal educators of today should
Mm-hmm.
focus on in order to prepare our students for this ever evolving legal landscape?
Right. Absolutely. I think there's two. You can break them up into two camps, so to speak. One is the technology itself. And the technology I look at on the EDRM, uh, on the EDRM model itself. So starting with information governance, maybe going a little off into the left to cyber and privacy as well, because those are emerging fields for us. But then coming all the way over to the right from information governance to forensics, processing, review, not forgetting what happens after document reviews. So trial prep, depositions, presentations, things of that nature. So learning holistically about the technology, but then also equipping, the students with the ability to do strategic thinking. I think that's very important, especially now that we have generative AI on the landscape. So strategic thinking paired with technical acumen, I think is really the skill sets that are important.
Oh, I like that technical acumen. I'm gonna co-opt that phrase.
Yeah,
Well,
I
and
love.
this is also a kind of tricky for us as paralegal educators. Oftentimes, our educators are attorneys or judges, and also paralegal practitioners like myself and Kelli. And we often are adjuncts. If we're not the program directors who run the paralegal programs, but as
Mhm.
the actual educators and adjuncts. And so, how can those educators who are positioned in those types of part-time roles, or who may not have a full-time stake, if you will, in
Right.
the education space, how do they effectively incorporate these e-discovery tools that you mentioned, and also these processes into their curriculum to enhance that practical learning? Kelli and I are very focused on that hands-on practical learning. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. There are a couple of ways to do that. I think some of them are just staying up to date on what's out there. So it could be newsletters, for example, newsletters that aggregate content so that you're getting information from multiple sources with one newsletter. So I would say, for instance, ACEDS Bits and Bytes newsletter, the EDRM Above the Fold. eDiscovery Today does a great job about talking about the latest innovations. Complex Discovery also does really good work at talking about not only tech, but when you're putting together presentations or you're trying to establish why it's important, they have great statistics for that. So going in and reading about them so that you understand what's current and what's out there. And maybe even in the same publications, you can find webinars, and that might be great content to bring into the classroom where people are demoing the software, they are sharing use cases, why it's important, how you would use it, things of those natures or things of that nature. So you can go in and you can read about the latest technology, and you can pull back from that materials that can be shared in the classroom as well.
I love that. Again, tapping into that, resource repository that we're
Mhm.
wanting to build, not just for, the future workforce, but for those of us in the workforce or, learning these emerging technologies. Similar to Kristine, my own start in the legal industry required me to also learn legal technology on the job, right? Hello,
Right.
concordance. I remember, trying to understand a whole new user interface. And then when things change and new technologies emerged, and learning a whole new system
Mhm.
can be really overwhelming. And then over the course of your career, right, we use this huge variety of legal technology to assist us in facilitating those different phases of the cases that you're working on, including those e-discovery platforms,
Yeah.
which are always ever changing. So I love that you've written about, overcoming technological challenges, right? Because there's no lack of them here in the legal field for us.
Mhm.
So in your article on the edrm.net, entitled Overcoming Technological Hurdles in Legal Investigations, you discussed this rapid pace of the advancement of technology within that e-discovery space.
Mhm.
Do you have any strategies that you might suggest that these legal educators, paralegal educators can employ to keep their teaching materials and methodology up to date with these advancements?
Absolutely. I think as a strategy, and it's a bit of a continuation from what we were just talking about, But when you're going to these sources that we just talked about to find out what the latest trends are and maybe find some content that you can bring back into the classroom, the people who are curating that content, those are the people who have access to the applications, to the technologies. And they are, I know a lot of them are open to partnering. So that you can get that technology into the classroom, whether it is the individual themselves showing up in a webinar, for instance, and answering questions, making sandboxes available, for example, for the students with training data. A lot of the times it is the people behind that content who are curating the content for engagement purposes. So the strategy is to find the people behind the content and connect. And then from there, to find ways to incorporate them or their resources directly into the day-to-day so that the students have hands-on experience. I think there's nothing really like hands-on experience, but then also understanding the strategy that goes along with the hands-on experience or that human touch, which is really what elevates the technology.
Yes, I love that. And I love how you highlight that need to partner with those creators, right? The developers, those that are developing this content. Well, they're the experts and they're the ones that have, been involved in the case studies. So it's a great suggestion for us to really, loop that into content. Into the curriculum, So, what are some common technological challenges that you see paralegals and legal staff facing in the field? And how do you think we can properly educate students so that they're prepared to overcome these specific challenges?
That's a great question. So I think that some of those challenges have to do with rapid updates to software, primarily due to the proliferation of data, the volume of data that we're starting to see in cases, um, the multiple numbers of softwares, applications you could be using, security issues, user friendliness, all of those things. I think that some strategies to employ would be hands-on learning at regular intervals, um, even if that means bringing in someone to do a demo, for example. And if you don't have the ability to be hands-on with the class, bring in someone who can be hands-on in the software and have the conversations with the students there. I think that also an emphasis on soft skills and critical thinking is also very important. Critical thinking and problem solving. I have found that improv classes improv classes can definitely help when you need to be agile, when you need to be adaptable, and oftentimes you see that in litigation technology. So improv classes can definitely help. Any behavioral exercises that you can do. Oftentimes when we're in the workplace, it's not so much, I mean, the technical skills are one thing, but how you would react if something happened and kind of having coursework or just things that prepare students in that way, I think that's also helpful as well.
Those are great tips. I really enjoy hearing that from you, especially having a demo. And we actually just used law practice management software in my class last week
Mm-hmm.
for the students to actually get that hands-on experience. And I told them, when you get into your entry-level roles and when you're interviewing for those roles, you can actually now say, oh no, I actually have hands-on experience within this specific law practice management software so that I can create an invoice, that I can create and do matter management and calendaring and docketing, etc., in this
Right.
legal space. So I think that's really a great tip for educators. And I kind of want to shift our discussion, Monica, because you and I have had the benefit of having past discussions around artificial intelligence and generative AI specifically. And we both kind of agreed that that element of human expertise is not negotiable. It's still very necessary in legal technology. And you being the prolific writer and author that you are, you wrote another article titled More Than Algorithms: The Human Expertise Amplified by Legal Technology. And
Yeah.
in that article, you highlighted, in fact, the importance of human expertise alongside technological tools.
Yes.
So that being said, how can we as educators balance that teaching technical skills while fostering what you just referenced, critical thinking and ethical considerations in legal technology as we move lightning fast with the iterations of AI?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's about integrated learning. So as you are going through those hands-on exercises, or even, as you are having that demo, having a case that goes with it that talks about the ethical considerations, that talks about how that played into the outcome of the case, but then pairing it with the technology as well, so that students get that side by side. We understand how to use the technology. We also understand how to use the technology when there are considerations on the table, like ethics, like bias, like things of that nature. So I think it's about the integrated learning.
Oh, that's fantastic. And Kelli and I love a case study. We often speak together in the community, and we always embed those ethical implications and use case studies on those outcomes that we're trying to demonstrate in our educational learnings. And I
Yeah.
have a follow-up question with regard to this because, you know, the human, again, that human experience, that human expertise is really necessary. And I'm wondering, can you provide like specific examples on how human expertise complements this kind of technology, especially in like legal investigations? And then how do we as the educators translate that into our teaching scenarios and curriculum?
Absolutely. I would say that you see a lot of the human element when it comes to QC, trust yet verify. So when you have an opportunity for, say, a TAR 1.0 workflow, or even with the generative AI that we have now that is doing a good lift of the first pass review, having the software go out and take a look at documents and then bringing that back to students who can also then take a look at the documents as well, particularly when it's a priv review. With priv, you need to understand relationships and context. That's very important. So taking a look at, say, what the software did and then what the students can determine for themselves, because they are the human element. And kind of understanding what the nuances are there. Also, you would see it, say, for digital forensics and collections when it comes to, say, chain of custody and things of that nature. Understanding that all of the custodians are accounted for, understanding that all of their data sources are accounted for, having technology do it first, but then bringing in the human element to take a look at what was done and really understand with human reasoning, accompanying the technical logic, that no stone was overturned and where there might be gaps and where they could be filled.
That's a really great response. And for some of us who are not familiar with that review terminology in that EDRM or the electronic discovery reference model, TAR, what Monica is referring to is technology assisted review. So her proposition is let the technology be the first pass, right? And then we will add that human element to really give that overlay on what happened here and how can we address this with our own human reasoning and logic. And then also with regard to priv review, we understand that to be privileged data and information that we are reviewing for. So thank you for sharing that, Monica. Really great suggestions.
Thank
Yes, absolutely. And Monica, it's I love that you brought up TAR because it's something, being in the legal sphere and working with legal technology for so long, it's something that we've had to get comfortable with for a long time. And it sort of being that first, deployment out to kind of wrap our fingers around what might be relevant or irrelevant in any given data set. And so I think it's just, more fuel to the fire of embracing and getting really comfortable with AI. I like to think of AI as that thought multiplier sort of thing, and if I can teach this tool to do exactly what I need it to do, how much more beneficial is that tool going to be to me? And so when we think about that, Kristine and I are firm believers in being agile, but also, continuing to feed that agility so that our interactions and the workflows that we're creating are instrumental in our process, right? So for
right.
paralegals, this looks different. So the importance of that professionalism and ethics, right, is absolutely paramount for the application and use of these tools when we're supporting legal matters. So you mentioned that software sort of going out, kind of like TAR, but I believe there's, other softwares or SaaS, right? Which is another way of referring to it, or cloud-based solutions in legal practice that are being adopted. And so what are the key considerations for legal educators to keep in mind when we're introducing these tools to the students?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say some of the key things to think about when you are bringing these tools into the classroom is about what their functionality is, where they are sitting on the EDRM. A majority of the work that we see that happens in the electronic discovery reference model is sitting in review. Although we're starting to see a shift over to where your information is stored and things of that nature, it's sitting in review. So that's going to really encapsulate a lot of the process, right, that you see there, about like 80% of it. However, where we see emerging and trending technology is happening long before you get to discovery. It's happening with cybersecurity. It's happening with data privacy. And so in that way, it's about what you need to know today, which is where we're sitting. And that's more about what's adjacent to doc review or privilege review or anything in the review space. But when you look ahead 3 and 5 years, that's what's sitting over in cyber and privacy. And so having access to that and bringing that to the forefront, so that there's some readiness there for any shifts that we see and trends that are coming up.
Great guidance. I love that sort of forward thinking, where we have to be looking. We have to be looking forward in this. And those, the technologists that have been in this environment for a long period of time are, they're setting the path for us to see. We have to be looking at it at the front end, right? We can't be thinking about data analysis after we've already been sued. So understanding that from a practical side is probably difficult to sort of translate to a student population. So I'm guessing, and Kristine probably guesses too, simulating these real world scenarios,
Mhm.
utilizing these cloud-based platforms to provide that hands-on experience might be the best way we can provide this information to the students. But how do we create that? How do we facilitate those hands-on experiences when we're talking about cloud-based platforms
Mhm.
in the teaching environment?
That's a great question. For educators, a lot of organizations that either make technology or are resellers with technology will have educational licenses. So you can talk to any of their business development professionals, and they will have licenses that are meant to be brought into the classroom. They are structured around that. There will be stipulations around them about how to engage the license. You'll have to go through the university's DNS, things of that nature, but they're specifically for educators. In addition to that, there is also some open source tools that are available as well. There are some great ones like Magnet, for example. Magnet is digital forensics. They are digital forensics in the public sector, and they have versions of their software which are complementary, and they're perfect for an introduction to what the software does. There's a few companies that have that as well. So I would say between the licenses that are set up specifically for educators with some of these companies, in addition to open source, or maybe even looking at kind of starter levels of the software, because a lot of the times the litigation technology industry was born around the fact that these technologies can be complex. So kind of giving an introduction is what's available in these tools, because the companies understand that there is a need to have that skill set, to understand what their tools do so that people can then make informed decisions about a deeper dive or things of that nature. And then last but not least, there's always bringing someone into the classroom who will do the demo, things of that nature. And that also can come with, access to a sandbox, for example, that the students can use as well.
It's that practicing piece, right? Practice till we make progress and almost perfection. So I like that, Monica. Thank you for sharing these invaluable resources for us. And as you may know, that is one of our main objectives of this podcast. With the guests and that we try to feature on the show, is we want timely information and resources for our audience, our paralegal educators. And of course, we know that staying informed on these industry trends is paramount to our success as educators, but also to the students learning, right, and their experience, and being competitive in this kind of market, especially in the litigation sphere. And I know that you are very active in industry events such as Relativity Fest, or RelFest, as we like to call it, or ILTACon. We have all these fun names for all these wonderful conferences and events in the industry. And I just am curious to hear your thoughts on how important you think that is for educators to stay engaged with these types of conferences, and what are the benefits from attending these types of events in the industry that they can bring to the classroom. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think it's very important for educators to be at these conferences, and I think that the conferences themselves understand that. Some of the conferences have programs set up around educators and students. So you mentioned RelFest, for example. RelFest has an academy where they have mentors and mentees. That is run by the wonderful Janice Holman, and she is accepting applications right now. So if you are interested in going to Relativity Fest, if you are interested in getting a relativity certification, you can find Janice Holman on LinkedIn, and you can apply to be either a mentor or a mentee. And that will allow you to go to the conference so that you can not only hear about the content that's meaningful, you can see the exhibit hall and you can see live demonstrations of the software that may be helpful to bring into the classroom, and you can talk to the people who are demoing it and have conversations about having them come back and talk to the students as well. So that's very important. I think ELTA has the same thing. They have they have participation that's centered around volunteerism. So that's one way to engage with that conference if you don't attend full on. What ELTA also has is a tech startup aisle specifically for their exhibitors. And so the companies I think that are going to be really the most agile in terms of coming directly to you and bringing their software and their cloud software to you specifically are probably those tech startups. They're in growth mode. They are looking to get their name out there. And if you contact them, they will bring their resources to you. And ILTA caters to that segment specifically. So I think that just generally going to these conferences to engage with the technology companies, to engage with the technology, to hear the meaningful content, to possibly get certified depending on the conference, right? I think it's very important for educators.
Wow, wow, wow. First guest out of season 2. Wow, look at all these amazing resources through RelFest, ILTACon. I think that that's a great suggestion. And, you may know this, that we actually, AFP has our upcoming virtual spring conference where we focus on the adjuncts, training, pedagogy, and methods. And so these types of resources are outstanding. So are there any specific resources or communities that you would recommend for us as educators so that we can stay updated outside of what we've already shared with RelFest and ILTACon and those startups? Anything in particular?
I think that a lot of those communities are the same ones that have the content that you can follow to stay up to date. And so the EDRM community, I would definitely join that to understand the EDRM has projects. In addition to all of the meaningful content that they curate. And so that's always great to stay abreast of, to understand how professionals are working together to really shape the eDiscovery community. I would become a part of the ACEDS community. They have wonderful education pieces as well as a certification, which could be a next step for anyone who is in a learning setting. So that's a wonderful community there as well. I'm trying to think. I think those two are a great start. And then from there, there's a lot of interconnectivity within eDiscovery as well. So from there, you will find other communities that you can join. I think, there's a few, but those two are rather large. and they encompass a good portion of what is happening in eDiscovery. So I would join those two so that you can get all of the educational content, you can be engaged, you can be involved, whether that's, say, at a local chapter meeting that's happening, at a networking event, at a webinar, or any content that you're reading. And I think that would be a great start to introduce you to other communities as well.
I love those suggestions, and knowing where to look for, a community that might feel like the right fit is so important for us. So thank you for sharing those resources. We appreciate that. So as we're going to wind down our conversation, I do want to get a couple last, tidbits of advice from you for some paralegal educators. So sort of reflecting on your own journey in legal technology and education of the same, what advice would you offer to paralegal educators striving to equip their students with, these necessary, like you said, skills, soft skills, durable skills, and knowledge for the future of the legal arena?
That is a great question. I would emphasize technical proficiency. We have talked about that, the technical acumen. That is absolutely critical. Also, I say strong analytical and critical thinking skills. I think that generally falls under the umbrella of strategy, but I think that is that's the human quotient. That's the most important part that really goes along with the technology. In addition to that, I think that e-discovery and digital forensics, we see like a bulk of the matters are really working with those technologies, but also keeping an eye to what's coming up, which is what we see in some of those adjacent communities as well, like information governance, like privacy, like cyber. I think a blend of those technical skills, of those soft skills, but not even necessarily soft skills, because strategy is a part of that as well, right? So soft skills, strategy, technical acumen, the ability to be nimble, and the ability to understand what's trending, and also stay on top of that as well. That would be my advice there.
Great advice. I love that. The human quotient. I love that you add that in there because it is so important. And technology can kind of make us feel squashed in the bigger picture. But to understand that the human being the common denominator across all of this for operations to be smooth is necessary. So you did touch on some projects with the EDRM. So are there any specific projects or initiatives that you've been involved in that you believe could serve as possibly valuable case studies or learning modules even for paralegal students?
Sure. There are several. I think that some of the projects and initiatives that I've been in, a lot of them are published, and I think we've talked about a couple of them in this webinar. But ones that I have been a part of, let's say, for instance, the EDRM has a project, which is the text message metadata project. Where we broke down some of the standard metadata that you would see when you're doing mobile collections. I think since that looks so different from what you would normally see when you're looking at emails and documents, that would be important. And then maybe even pairing that up with some of that open source collection software to compare what you're seeing based on what's in that project. Those together would be very helpful. And the EDRM also has several other projects that are ongoing. So you can view their work product there, unpack it. How did we get here? Or turn that into exercises. They have a list there that's really good as well. And then I would also lean back to ACEDS because of the amount of educational content that they have in terms of their certifications, and also really using that to help craft the journey forward.
Wonderful. Those are such excellent suggestions. And I actually was writing them all down because I was like, I don't want to miss these. I got to check into this. So thank you. Yes, thank you, Monica, for sharing this invaluable information, tips, tools, and resources for us to use in our content development for paralegal training programs. To our listeners, we appreciate you joining us on this episode of AFB's Legal Luminaries. We hope that our conversation with Monica has sparked curiosity on what the future holds for the legal landscape. For those eager to explore further, we've included relevant links in the show notes, and a special acknowledgement to Doug Lusk and the National Society for Legal Technology for their invaluable contributions to the post-production of this podcast. As we wrap up, we'd like to leave you with a thought-provoking question. If you had just 20 minutes to interview anyone, who would you choose to speak with? We encourage you to share your thoughts and suggestions with us. Thank you once again, and we look forward to having you with us on the next episode of AFB's Legal Luminaries. Until then, keep forging those connections and building relationships that illuminate the legal landscape. Goodbye for now.